Guten Morgen. Es tut mir leid, dass mein Deutsch leider sehr schlimm ist. So heute muss ich auf English sprechen, and I appreciate your tolerance of that. I'm one of those horrible Americans who speaks 1,1 languages, and the comma 1 is German, and very bad German at that. So I appreciate this. So I was asked to give a talk like yesterday, and then afterwards there'll be a discussion with you, and also a discussion up here on the stage with some folks. So I wrote a book called, as you know now, Public Parts or Mehr Transparenz wagen auf Deutsch. And it's what I want it to be is a book about publicness, about the value of the internet as a mechanism for us all to be public. Each of us now has a Gutenberg press in our pockets. Each of us now can be public, speak to the public, find a public, join a public, pardon me, act as a public. And don't we see this happening right now in Turkey and Brazil, and before that in Egypt and Tunisia? We see this incredible tool that people can use. Those are not internet revolutions going on. Those are revolutions of brave people, but they are using these tools to find each other, to realize they're not alone, to organize then. And that's extremely powerful. We can share our knowledge. We can share so much. We can create relationships. So I want to protect this idea of the internet as a tool of publicness. And I fear that if we go too far and try too hard to protect for privacy, that we could limit that publicness the internet brings us. Now, privacy is very, very important, and I want to make clear that the two are not at war with each other. As this gentleman said, they're like hot and cold and wet and dry. Privacy and publicness depend upon each other. We are all private, we are all public. But I want both those ideas to be in the discussion. To be in the discussion here about the future of the internet. And so I want to deal with both issues. Thus, I have to deal with privacy. I have to get through privacy and see what privacy is about before I can then get to publicness. Now, we didn't always all want to be private or want to be public. These are evolving concepts in society. When Gutenberg invented the press, the earliest authors were a little freaked out about having their ideas set down permanently and spread widely in print. Jonathan Swift, famous author of the time, of course, said that a book of verses kept in a drawer and shown to a few friends was like a virgin much sought after. But a book, once published, is like a common whore, he said, anyone can buy for 2 crowns. The idea of publicness was something that freaked out the earliest authors. They didn't seek the fame that we seek today. Now, the fascinating thing to me is that technology, changes in technology, often lead to panics about privacy, a techno-panic, I would call it, right? And the first serious discussion of a legal right to privacy in the United States didn't come until the year 1890, and this was the reason. The invention of the Kodak camera. It freaked people out that suddenly someone could take your picture anywhere, it could appear in the press, and there was a feeling of taking away your privacy because of the camera. Now, of course, we did figure it out and did get used to it, but first we had to go through some panic. So the New York Times at the time talks about fiendish Kodakers lying in wait. A young Vanderbilt heir horsewhipped a Kodaker for taking his picture in public. President Teddy Roosevelt banned Kodaking in Washington parks because we didn't know what to do about it, right? And there was this fear that we didn't know how to adapt our norms and our laws and our society to this new technology. So our first reaction was to stop it, was to keep tradition and keep life the way it was. But of course, we figured it out. We're smart. It took us a little while, but we got there. Now, Alan Weston, who's a scholar of privacy, back in 1967 listed all kinds of technologies that he thought could really cause privacy hell, right? Little microphones, little cameras, the telephone, LSD, the drug, could make you reveal your entire head to the world. Magnetic tattoos that could track you anywhere, and so on and so on. So all these things, he said, were cause for fear about privacy. And mind you, it's worthwhile asking what could go wrong with the technology and privacy. But if that's all we do, then all we get is the worst. We never get the best. Well, I don't think that Weston's vision of dystopia came. It didn't happen. Today, here in Germany, Peter Schaar has his own list of technologies that could cause great fear about privacy. And again, I don't put this here to mock that. It is worthwhile to worry about these things, to discuss them, to think about them. But again, if that's all we do, then we're going to end up living a too sheltered life. Douglas Adams, the author, said that anything that's invented before we're born is normal. Anything invented before we're 30 years old is cool. Anything invented after we're 30 is the end of civilization and is scary as hell until, of course, we get used to it, then it's okay and it's cool again, right? And that's what's happening here. So now we have perhaps the most disruptive technology since Gutenberg's own, the internet. And what's happening in society? We're negotiating new norms and new laws and new rules about how we behave with each other in a society. It's a normal and good process going on. But I think that if we see it as too strange, as too difficult, then we have problems. Elizabeth Eisenstein, who's a key scholar of Gutenberg, says that it took 50 years after the invention of the press before the book took on its own form. It took 100 years, a full century, before the impact of the book on society was fully felt. In that sense, we are now in the year 1472 in Gutenberg years. We're just at the beginning. As Chancellor Merkel said yesterday, we're all in Neuland, which was a much amusement on Twitter, for those of you who missed it. My favorite bit on Twitter this morning was a picture of the Chancellor arriving in a helicopter somewhere with a picture of a big, mean cat outside looking in saying, "You've arrived in Neuland, now go back." So, I find Germany a fascinating place for many reasons. I love coming here for all kinds of reasons. I have for many years. I've done business here. But when I started to look into privacy and publicness, of course, Germany is an amazing laboratory because privacy matters so much here. Now, the argument is made that that's because, of course, of political history. But my Schwiegeropa came from Emden over to the US in 1923. And he was characteristically very private. And he would say to me and my wife, "You mustn't tell people that. They don't need to know that." Right? So I do think, tell me if I'm wrong, I do think that privacy is part of the German culture, right? But I also think that the reaction to the internet has been fascinating because it's in Germany that you invented a word and a right, the Verpixelungsrecht, the right to be pixelated in Street View. Now, I see some of you laughing, and frankly, in the US, we couldn't figure this out either. What was so scary about taking a picture of a public building from a public place, right? And of course, I read all the stories about people fighting with their neighbors. You know, I want the building pixelated. No, I don't want it pixelated, and so on and so on. When I came to look at where I was going to stay in the hotel here in Nuremberg, I went to Street View, and boom, it was pixelated. It didn't exist. So that's one attitude in Germany toward privacy, of course. And then I'm going to make a joke now. I hope it doesn't offend you. But on a visit some years ago, I finally came to the wonders and joy of coming to my first German sauna, which, of course, is nackt und gemischt. And to an American, this is utterly shocking because we are puritanical. We have a childish view of our bodies. We can't imagine being public in that sense and being naked in front of other people. It's amazing. As you have taught me, it's no big deal, but to us, it's amazing. So the joke is this. The Germans, I argue, care deeply about the privacy of everything, except, of course, their private parts. Now, that's just a cheap joke, and I know it's not really true because I know no one wants a camera in the sauna. I get that. But it does make us ask the question of why is the private private and why is the public public? And culturally, we all have differences coming into this internet age, into Neuland, where perhaps we're going to share a culture. The Scandinavians share their income and their taxes for all to see. The Dutch open their windows. I mentioned this yesterday. When I wanted to find this picture, I went to Google Street View, and I went looking in Amsterdam for a view of a window at a house with the curtains open. I couldn't find one. So either this is a lie or everyone knew Street View car was coming that day and closed their drapes. But generally it's said, correct, that the Dutch leave their windows open. We Americans think that once you're arrested for a crime, we don't pixelate you. Here you do. Of course, we Americans now have some other odd views about privacy that we'll get to a little later that we can talk about. And on behalf of America, I apologize for PRISM. And then we have us tweeters who supposedly are telling you everything about our lives, even our breakfast, as if anyone could care, right? But what we're doing is testing out this new medium, this new society we have. So as I looked around and tried to find a definition of privacy, I found it surprisingly difficult to define privacy. One definition is that you are deprived of public notice. Hannah Arendt says that if you are not public, you are not fully human. That being public was a right that we as people had, in her view. It's argued that privacy was kind of invented with the invention of the hallway and the back stairs. Because before that, you had room on room on room, and you went through everyone else's life. There was no privacy in the village or the building or the home. It was only through the creation of this technology, the hallway, that we created the idea that you could lock yourself off in a private space. Daniel Solov, who's a key scholar of privacy in the US, says that the word means everything and nothing. Right? It's a blank slate people can put in their own meanings. Brandeis and Warren were the American jurists who wrote the essay in 1890 that began the discussion of a legal right to privacy. In our Bill of Rights, of which I'm very proud, privacy, the word, is not used at all. And they had to infer in the freedom from search and seizure and so on and so forth. They had to infer in that the idea of a right to privacy. And that right, of course, is being used now in the fight about PRISM and our spying on citizens. Brandeis and Warren said in the end, privacy is a feeling, it's an emotion. And that doesn't denigrate it and say it's worthless or meaningless. Emotions matter, but emotions are very hard to get your hands around. I love this definition. Richard Parker said that privacy should be seen as control over who can see us, hear us, touch us, smell us, taste us, in some control over who can sense us. That is ridiculous. That means that we would all live like the Unabomber in a cave somewhere or a shed in the middle of nowhere. Right? I don't want to live in a society that is so scared of each other that we're going to live like that. So, a bad definition of privacy, I think, is the idea of control. A worse definition of privacy is this notion of creepy. And I don't know how well that translates into German, but I hear this all the time in the US, that something is creepy. Google Glass is creepy. Other technologies that are invented are creepy. The problem with that word, it is pure emotion. There is no definition of it. It just means that it's unfamiliar, and I don't know how to adjust to it yet. But we cannot regulate and create laws around this notion of, I don't like that because it's creepy. Dana Boyd is a brilliant researcher in the US who studies young people, teenagers, and the internet. And she argues, by the way, that teenagers are not handing over their entire lives online. The belief is that teenagers don't care about privacy, right? And they think privacy is dead. Wrong, says Dana. Dana deals with teenagers, and they have very sophisticated ways to control their privacy online. She also taught me the idea that We should not be trying to regulate the gathering of information, the acquisition of knowledge. We should regulate the use of that information. We also shouldn't regulate technologies because technologies change. Look at the privacy we have in the US. We have a strict legal privacy for a first-class letter sent in the mail. But that privacy, that principle, does not extend to parcels that are not first class, to email, to Twitter direct messages, to Skype. To me, the principle of privacy should say that a private communication is private, full stop. And that would have an impact on the discussion with PRISM. But we don't have that principle because we regulate around technology. We regulated privacy and communication to first-class mail because that's what existed. What we should be doing instead is talking about the uses of data and regulating that. So when I try to define privacy, I came in the end to the idea that privacy is an ethic of knowing someone else's information. If I tell you something, it is now public to that extent. What happens with it is up to you. It's your responsibility. I can't do any more to keep you. So you've got to decide the context in which I told you this. Did I pull you off to a corner and tell you something secret? Did I tell you something I want to share? You have to decide that. And I think that there are a lot of ethics of privacy that we in our industries need to be concerned with and need to find ourselves operating above others and trying to get ahead of this to say that this is how we operate. So we shouldn't steal or trick someone into giving us information. It should be an open transaction. We should protect someone's information from theft. We should be transparent about how we're going to use information. I think in the US, we in the media, advertising, and technology businesses did a terrible, terrible job with this. We didn't tell people why we collected the information, what we collected, what we were going to do with it, what benefit it had to them, and we didn't give them control and transparency about that. And that is what allowed cookies to be demonized, to be made to be considered the devil's work, right? Oh no, cookies are creepy, right? Well, if we are transparent, I think we have the opportunity. We give people access to their own information. We let them know how we use this. We don't use it against them. And we return value. Now, if that's the ethic of privacy, I think there is also an ethic of publicness, which is the ethic of sharing information that might benefit someone else. And this is about being generous and transparent and authentic. When you share this way in public, you enable collaboration, which I think is a very important thing for companies to learn. It's a lesson that Google has taught us. When Google releases a beta of a product, it is Google's statement, very human statement, that this product is imperfect and unfinished. It's Google inviting us to help them finish it. It is an invitation to collaboration. So let's talk for a moment about the benefits of publicness, because I think that's what I want to protect in the net. Now, I have shared the most intimate of information. I told the world about my prostate cancer, which means I told the world about my malfunctioning penis. And you cannot get more public than that. Impossible. Now, you might say that I'm insane to have done this. Why the hell would anyone reveal this? Well, I got a lot of benefit back. I had people who came to me who gave me advice and support. A friend of mine, I didn't know it had the operation 10 years before I did. He gave me incredibly detailed, intimate information about what would happen with this. When he saw me sharing it on the web, he then went and shared it on the web. I've inspired men who are over 40, friends of mine, to get their PSA tested, and I recommend you all do the same, because you might as well have this information. So I had no problem with sharing this online. I did have 2 people who criticized me, and both of them didn't like me anyway. But one of them talked about the idea that I was oversharing, which is a really strange concept, oversharing. I was sharing too much, which was really his way of trying to tell me to shut up. And I think the problem here was not that I was oversharing. The problem was that he was over-listening. He was telling me what I could and could not say, and I can't stand that. Pardon me. We should look at the internet, I think, as a magnificent mechanism for sharing. And sharing is a generous act and a good thing in general. Mark Zuckerberg, of course, has built his business on this, and the belief, his version of Moore's Law, is that we will share twice as much every year on year. 1 billion people on Facebook cannot be wrong or drunk. They're sharing for a reason, because they get benefit out of this. They're sharing 2.5 billion things a day on Facebook alone. That's incredible. 300 million photos a day, 400 million tweets, 72 hours of video uploaded to YouTube. Now, publicness, sharing, brings many benefits. It enables us to create relationships. And as marketers, I think that's critically important. In my trade of journalism and media, I think we have done a terrible job of understanding the opportunity to have relationships with people. We see the world as mass, right? We're mass media. That's what we've always done. You in these rooms have gone beyond that to try to understand people as individuals. And that's a major leg up you have on the rest of media, I think. Because when we see people as a mass, well, I'm not a mass, and you're not a mass, and you're not a mass. We're just people. And that's the way you have to see us. So by sharing with each other, that enables us to make relationships. It enables collaboration, as I said before. I think it builds trust, because if you're secretive, people might wonder why you're secretive. What is it you have to hide? It disarms the myth of perfection, and that really was an honest-to-God typo I had in there, but I left it because it's too perfect. In the industrial age, products had to be perfect because we tool up a factory to make them, and then if we're wrong, we can't change them. But of course, online we can. And that idea that we're not perfect is what enables collaboration. Publicness and sharing, I think, reduces stigmas. The most powerful weapon that gays and lesbians had, I believe, was the courage to stand out in public and force the bigots who would push them into a closet back out and said, we're gay, you got a problem with that. That's a very powerful force of publicness. So the internet, I think we should look at as a public place. It's not a medium like a newspaper or a magazine or TV. It's a square where people talk with each other. It is indeed the public sphere, Pace Jürgen Habermas. It is the place where we can gather together and do what we want to do. Let me talk about a few companies that I think are using publicness well, startups. Local Motors is a company in the US that enables people to design cars collaboratively, which sounds friggin' insane. When I first mentioned this idea in my last book, an auto writer came to me and said, that's nuts, Jarvis. Who wants to drive the Homer? Now, those of you who know The Simpsons know the Homer was the car that Homer Simpson designed. It had 2 domes, one of them the kids were in so you couldn't hear them, with I think it had handcuffs and leg irons, shag carpeting, and as many cup holders as you could imagine in heaven. And it bankrupted his cousin's car company. But Local Motors doesn't do that. Local Motors has a CEO named Jay Rogers. It is his responsibility to make economically viable, safe cars. But he has learned to listen to his community. So he put out a challenge and said, we're going to make a muscle car in Arizona. And various designs were submitted. The community voted on the winner. This is it. Then the community worked on individual elements of the car. That taillight there. Someone in the community designed a taillight that everybody said, oh, it's beautiful, we have to have it. But Jay Rogers found out that it would add a cost of $1,000 to every car. So everyone said, no, never mind. Then they looked through a bunch of other easily available parts, and that is a Honda taillight lens that costs $75. Now, I wouldn't have known that. But what amazes me about this tale is that when you give your customers the respect and the opportunity to work with you, they can give you great wonders and value back. They can even make design decisions and economic decisions that are mutually beneficial. That is incredibly powerful, but it's possible only if you develop in public. What happens in Detroit? In Detroit, they literally put cloths over the cars to keep them secret. And then when they finally take off the cloth, we all yawn because we had no chance to tell them what the car should be. Local Motors is making cars this way. In fact, Jay told me that now some big car companies, including one here in Germany, is going to Local Motors to try to get his community to help them with their design challenges. Because it's Jay who's recognized the power of the community to help out. Kickstarter, I presume you've all heard of Kickstarter, is a wonderful platform that lets people come in with an idea and then get enough money to raise it. The 3Doodler is a great thing. I love this toy. It's a 3D printer's printing head taken out of the printer and put on a handle. So you can draw on paper in plastic, and then you can draw in 3D. It's really wowy. It's really cool. I ordered one immediately, supposedly for my daughter, but I will steal it from her. So they raised $2.3 million. That's not equity, of course. That's pre-orders. So they got 26,000 pre-orders raising that much money. They're able to use their customers' capital to build the product. Now, what's amazing to me about this is the best possible market research you could have. Right? That means people want this product. That you reduce the risk immensely this way. Now, the truth is, a lot of things on Kickstarter fail. And you know what? That's okay too, because then you've reduced the risk by not going ahead and making a product nobody wants. So Kickstarter is an amazing way to become collaborative with your public. And because you buy before the product is made, it also enables Kickstarter to help inventors and entrepreneurs improve the product before it comes out. And I've seen that happen many times there. I meant to correct this slide. Waze, you've all heard of now, I assume, is the mapping platform that was bought by Google for $1 billion. Does anyone here use Waze? I recommend it highly. I have avoided horrible traffic jams oftentimes. It'll direct me around. I've found new routes. I've been driving to the same office for 20 years. I found a new route the other day. I never would have guessed because Waze was directing me around. Now, the way that Waze works is that because I'm a member, when I carry my phone around from here, it knows what road I'm on. It knows how fast I'm going. Thus, it knows whether there's a traffic jam or not. That is a passive way that I can share with Waze and the community. And I'm happy to do it because they all share with me. As you drive along the road, being careful not to do this while you're driving, you will see little alerts that come up. Somebody says, oh, there's a policeman there. There's a stalled car there. There's a pothole there. Amazing data that comes up. The community also corrects the maps. This is why Google bought them, because it has great value. But it's not a content site. It's a platform that enables millions of people to passively, automatically share information to mutual benefit. That's a great thing. I think we have to look at this, the idea of moving the customer up the chain. In the past, customers could have a voice in a product only after it was finished, after it was designed and manufactured and shipped and marketed. Then the customer came in. Well, clearly we've got to try to move the customer up earlier in the process, not just to marketing and having a voice in that, which of course they do on Twitter, but also into design and even into the idea of whether a product should be made. So Kickstarter does it one way. Quirky does it another way. Inventors come to them and suggest a product. One of their big hits is a power strip. They have one for Europe where each plug rotates so you can fit all the plugs you want on it really neatly. It's ingenious. An inventor came to them and said, do you want this thing? They made the product. They share the revenue with the inventor. And the way the inventions are picked is that once the staff has culled through the best ideas, they then present them to the community. And the community votes on the inventions. And I participated in an event Rather like, I don't know if you have, in the US we have Shark Tank, or where the investors sit in front and choose whether or not businesses are to be funded. It's become, entrepreneurs are becoming stars now. And this is a way that inventors can become stars as well. Very powerful. One last point here that I think matters to marketers. In the US, eBay, which is, Best Buy, which is our struggling but biggest electronics retailer, which just left Europe, of course, is now renting out huge swaths of space to Samsung and Microsoft and Apple. And what that means to me is that retail space becomes marketing space instead of fulfillment space. And that becomes another competitor in our world. The retail space becomes media. In fact, Best Buy has a media sales department and a rate sheet for buying media, the store as media. That's a whole other world we have to get to. So, we tend to think these days, in my business, everyone's in the media business, right? Well, I don't think so. I think that's a dangerous assumption, because media, frankly, is not a great business. I think instead we are all in the relationship business. And again, you have a leg up over the rest of media because you have been trying to learn details about people and act on that. We tend to also think that we need big data, right? We need tons and tons and tons of data. I don't think so. I've worked with a few newspaper companies around the world where they find they have users on the internet who are in their markets versus out of their markets, people who come in from Google or such. Right? Well, they didn't know even who lived inside their market because they treated everybody like a mass, like they used to. So I had them calculate the difference in value from an in-market user to an out-of-market user. An in-market user in all these cases was worth at least 25 times per month what the out-of-market user was worth. Because of course they had in-market ad sales, in-market advertisers. That was more valuable. Small data. The first thing to learn is, does this person live in my market or not? The next thing to learn is, what town do they live in? What neighborhood do they live in? What neighborhood do they work in? And that enables media to target the content they already have to those details. But we in media don't even know that. We don't have this discipline that you have to start to build relationships. The common belief about media economics online is that we've moved from print dollars to digital dimes to mobile pennies. Dr. Borda said at Day a few years ago, damn digital pennies. Now, Eric Schmidt appeared at an event with The Guardian in New Delhi a few months ago. And I saw him say, this will be more valuable than the web. Why is that? Because we know who you are and we know something about you. Quell your German fears of Datenschutz going crazy here for a moment, right? As marketers, we know that's the value of mobile. So mobile is not another way to give you content. Mobile is a signal generator about you as a person. Who you are, where you've been, where you're going, what you want to look for, what you're buying, who your friends are. These are clearly all valuable signals. And the mobile device isn't about just being on the road. It means that it's about me. It's local to me. Not even my postal code, but me. Mobile device means relevance. That's what Google understands. And if we don't catch up to Google and understand that, they will eat us in this next line. I saw stats just yesterday. I'm on a podcast called This Week in Google. And one of the numbers we talked about last night is that Google now has half of all mobile advertising. That's because they understand how to have relationships with people. And I'm happy to have it. When I go home, this will probably tell me, if I use Google now, how long it'll take me to get to my hotel or my train reservation or whatever. Because I'm happy to let Google know that because they give me value back. I visited Google's programming team in Munich 2 years ago. And of course, they're working on privacy in Germany because it's the front line of privacy here. And they've dealt with crises involving Street View and Buzz and so on. But they told me that they'd had basically no complaints about Google Priority Inbox. Why? Because Google's reading my email. And yes, thank you, Google. You're also going to read my spam. So you're giving me value back for that. And I think that relevance to you as an individual is the key to where the net is going to go next with mobile. But there are responsible ways to do it. And I think that Amazon actually sets a value. My daughter is a Taylor Swift fan. And whenever I buy something for her with Taylor Swift, Amazon thinks that I'm some kind of dirty old man, and it's given me all kinds of teeny bopper singers and Justin Bieber albums. I say, stop! Right? But of course, what Amazon does is it tells me, here's what we know about you, here's why we're recommending this to you, and it gives me the chance to fix it. And when I do fix it, I've only made myself more valuable to Amazon and given them another data point about me. But it's okay because I then get more relevance and fewer Justin Bieber albums. So I think that there are ways to consider, and these are the things we talked about before, the ethics of what we do. I think it's not a problem at all to have a relationship with a human being so long as that human being consents and understands the value of it. So in the internet, we are faced right now with a challenge to decide whether it's walled or open, whether it's controlled or free. Privacy has many advocates, many advocates, many of them right here in Germany. But publicness also needs its advocates to defend the net. Who will protect the net? We must. We, the citizens of the net, the citizens of Neuland, must defend the net and what it does. So I'll skip by this so we can get to discussion, but I think we need a discussion at the level of principles about what it means to have an open society, what it means to have a generous and sharing society, but also what it means to protect our rights in that society. So we need to protect privacy, yes, absolutely. But we also have to protect our ability to connect and speak and assemble and act. We have to protect the idea that, we have to fight for the idea that our institutions' information, government's information, should be transparent by default and secret by necessity. Government is the opposite today. It is secret by default and transparent by force. Witness the PRISM story, witness WikiLeaks. I think we also have to decide that what's public is a public good. If Google or I come along and take a picture of a building in public, and you tell me I can't, and you tell me I must pixelate it, isn't that a violation of my free speech rights? These are balances of rights that we have to understand and negotiate as a society. And finally, all bits are created equal. If any bit on the internet is detoured or stopped by a government or a company, then no bit can be presumed to be free. These are the principles, I believe, of an open and free internet. This is what I want to fight for. This is why I wrote the book and what I want to talk about. But that's what I have to say to you today, and I'd love to have a conversation right now and come and chat with you.